and welcome to Overtime Hockey Talk. My name is Mark Paul. My co-host Justin Baker here with me as we break down some of the final games of round one, all the teams that went to game 7. A little late to the party, I suppose, but Justin, we love being late to the party, don't we?
There's no other way to do it.
Well, we don't record the show every day, so what are we going to do? Not talk about the game 7s? I mean, just pretend that they didn't happen? No, I mean, also these game 7s do have an impact on the series going forward. So it's worth revisiting and seeing what these teams did to get past round 1, and from there that'll lead us into round 2, and I guess a couple of the games have already happened. But we'll give our predictions for the round. We did put them out on Twitter before the round started, so in fairness, those things aren't going to change. So we were legit. We got it. We took the picture, the proverbial picture with the newspaper. So we proved we took it. That we did it before the date started. So we're good.
Let me ask you. Speaking of newspaper stuff. Do people still do the whole baby thing where they give you a picture of the newspaper the day you were born and frame it and crap? Is that still a thing?
I know what you're talking about. You refreshed my memory, but I know what you're talking about, but nobody ever did it for us.
Okay, yeah, because I know you of course those who don't listen to the show on the regular, Mark has 2 kids who were recently born in the last couple of years, and so a big baby gift that people, used to give, I guess, I don't know if they do it anymore, is basically they would show up with like a picture frame where they'd grab a copy of the day's newspaper that, when the baby was born, and then they would give it to you as a gift. And I don't know if you're supposed to hang in the baby's room or
sounds like something that goes straight into the garbage. Or maybe not into the garbage, but it definitely goes into a box that obviously gets seen years later, and you go, "Oh, wow."
Yeah, so
Look at
I'll
this.
Be honest. I actually collected newspapers from the whole newspapers. I didn't just do clippings back from the 90s and early 2000s when the Red Wings were winning cups and stuff. And then, I have all of them. The Detroit Free Press used to have these inserts with the Russian 5
and the
cool
huge
shit.
full page color pictures of them and stuff.
Yes.
Yep. I have one when Gretzky retired.
Ooh, that's a good one.
From I think the Toronto Star.
Okay.
I remember my grandpa gave me that one, and I have a few. I think I have one from when Curtis Joseph signed with the Maple Leafs. That was a big day, and that was really at the very beginning of the internet. You can go on and see news, but I think I was at camp, and my dad sent me the news clippings in the mail. I was like, unbelievable, this guy's my favorite goalie in the league. I couldn't believe it. I had no idea how free agency worked when I was 12 or 11 or 12. I feel like at 11 or 12, if I was 12 now, I would know how free agency works, but there just wasn't the same kind of, it wasn't as easy to learn that stuff at that age because there was not much of an internet presence. I suppose there was, but not like there is now. Anyway.
Yeah, I first learned about it when I'm sure you remember back 2002 when the Red Wings signed every superstar Hall of Famer. So,
yep, when they purchased that cup for about $80 million, which
yes, sir.
It's fun.
Worth every penny.
The Caps finally caught up with the 2002 Red Wings.
I know, right?
I think they would finally be over the cap. That's how long it took. Crazy. It is crazy when you think about that. You think about that's 20 years ago, and I'm sure if I look up 2002 Detroit Red Wings salary, that it's gonna they were at $65 million. That was a
lot of money. I remember. I think it was Fedorov. He wanted $8 or $10 million, and that's why he left to go to
Columbus,
to Washington. Oh yeah, Columbus. That's right.
Can you go Columbus? Yeah.
Yeah.
But that is it's $65 million. That was back in 2002. You think about how long it took the salary cap to get to that point. I could have sworn they were higher. You know what? I'll bet you that the New York Rangers had a higher salary. I remember there was a time when the Rangers just had such an outrageous team salary. Yeah, here it is. 2002, 2003, they were at $76 million.
Ooh.
So there you go. See, they were.
I don't even think the Coyotes still spend that kind of money.
Right, and that's 20 years ago. It's crazy that we almost still haven't caught up to the spending. I mean, obviously there are teams, you're spending more than that in the long run. I think right now the Vegas Golden Knights have spent $96 million on players, but the lowest, Buffalo Sabres, $65 million. So there's that's just the cap hit with like LTIR and all that. But okay, well let's dive into round one. What we came here for. Those final 3 game sevens. Where do you want to start? Which game 7 catches your fancy first?
Oh wow! Let's go Boston, Florida, because that's the one that I want to brag about the most.
Yes, that is true. And for I'll tee you up because it'll make you sound less prideful. No, we like to brag about correct predictions on our show because Justin legitimately before the playoffs started, he called the Florida Panthers in 7 games, and he said, I legitimately think that the Panthers can win this one. I like the matchup, and here we are. The Bruins are gone, and you were correct. You stuck with them the whole time, too, even when they were down 3-1. You said, I'm just sticking with them until 7. How did you know? How did you know?
Well, I mean, for one thing, right, I just hate Boston. I mean, that makes it easy to pick against them. But, secondly, the reason I wanted to pick against them more than anything else was just the curse of the President's Trophy. I look back at, a lot of teams, especially like the Wings of the 90s, Tampa, a few years back, and in Boston, when they set these records, they all flame out real quick.
Yeah, but the Red Wings went to the conference finals.
They did. Yes, we did mention that. I think on the show too, you did point that out. And but for the most part, right, these teams don't necessarily go all the way or aren't guaranteed a conference.
They usually don't lose in the first round, though.
Not typically. No, you're right about that. But again, I know this Florida Panther team was built for the playoffs. Tkachuk is a beast, and what do you know? He was the guy that showed up. He and Brandon Montour decided to put this team on their back and carry them through it at those last few games. And I mean, really, it kind of sucks. You hate it when, now I guess a lot of Boston fans are probably going to point to the fact that, Bergeron was never really healthy for most of the series, and Krejci was in and out, and, he only played 4 games. So again, you can say what you want, but your best players have to be your best players, right? And you look at David Pastrnak, he only put up 5 goals, which is good, but 0 assists and -2. So he was, meh throughout the series. He was okay. When your best player is Tyler Bertuzzi, I mean, that's where there's a problem.
Yeah, I mean, nothing against Tyler Bertuzzi, but there are players on that team who should be better, right?
Right, absolutely. And they got beat 5-on-5, right? Bergeron only put up 1 goal, a -6 in 3 games. I don't like to read into those plus minuses too much, but in 3 games, if you're -6, you're not doing something right 5-on-5. And that's where a majority of, that's where Boston got beat, was 5-on-5. They were putting it up on the power play. I mean, Bertuzzi, Marchand, each 6 points, Orlov 4 points, Krejci 3 points on the power play, but ultimately 5-on-5, they just didn't have enough to get it done outside of Taylor Hall.
Okay, yeah. The Panthers just found another level, and I think that my guess is that the Bruins, you're going for a record like that, you aren't just going to rest guys. Like, you can win a Stanley Cup, absolutely. Like, somebody wins the Stanley Cup every year. And no one wins 65 games. There is definitely something to be said about winning the regular season in such a fashion. Like, they're probably the best, like, one of the best regular season teams ever, and they obviously have a record to tout that. And yeah, they didn't win the cup, but that doesn't take away what they did in the regular season. And they also probably had they been around 56 wins, they may have been resting players, and like some guys might have gone on to IR a couple of times. Bergeron playing through a herniated disc. It sounds like Allmark was playing through some injuries. Like this this team definitely got beat themselves up to win in the regular season, which is odd because the Bruins seemed like the team that would be like Florida. Yeah, let's have just a halfway regular season and then let's turn it on in the playoffs, whereas they just had the greatest regular season of all time in terms of points and wins. By the way, let's see if you can guess do you know who the last team to win the President's Trophy and win the Cup was?
Washington?
It is the Chicago Blackhawks in 2013. And before
that's been a while.
Before that, the Detroit Red Wings of 2002.
Wow.
To win the Stanley Cup. And then ironically, you had the 02 Wings, 01 Avalanche, the 99 Stars, and the 94 Rangers all won the President's Trophy and won the Cup. So you had, 5 teams in the matter of 8 years that won the President's Trophy that also won the Cup. But then over the next 20 years, 2 teams have won the Cup that have won the President's Trophy. That is a darn hard thing to do.
Yeah, and that just shows the disparity in the league, right? I mean, those 90s and early 2000s, right? I think there were maybe 6 or 7 legit teams every year where you thought, okay, these guys are going to be one of the winners, where now you can easily point to 10 or 12 teams that have a legit shot at winning the Cup when they get in the playoffs. And, man, I will say the one thing about this Florida series, and we've kind of already started seeing it with, last night's game against Toronto, but Florida, man, they were going in full throttle to end the season because they were looking like they might miss, and man, they blanketed. They had the Jets turning. I mean, they just were on every puck, and man, it was fun to watch in that Boston series. I mean, I often wonder though, I know you mentioned Allmark's injury there a second ago, him playing injured. I wonder if they had gone to Swayman a little earlier. Would that have turned the favor?
He should have gotten another game. And you know what? They swapped them all year long. And then you get to the playoffs, and for whatever reason, no one's really willing to just jump. Hey, let's just go between goalies like we did all year long. No one's willing to do it. And it's interesting. Why is it that we're so comfortable doing it all year? It's how we operate. Also, side note, it won you 65 games. And then out of 82. So theoretically, you're winning about 3 out of 4, right? So it's interesting to say, well, let's just not do that anymore. And let's play this guy every other night in pressure situations. And it obviously proved to be too much. And although I'm not putting this on Allmark, I think that overall the Bruins just they didn't have it. It doesn't help to not have Bergeron for the first few games, and to just kind of come in banged up.
But they were up 3-1.
That's true.
I mean, they had
that's true. Yeah, in the games
with Bergeron.
Yeah, so maybe Bergeron shouldn't have played. I guess I don't know.
Maybe not.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's definitely a tough out. We may never see this Bruins team again. That might be the end of Bergeron, Krejci. I don't know. I said it to you that I feel like it'd be tough to end my career on that.
Yeah, right? That's hard, right? I mean, you don't want to go out. I mean, don't get me wrong. They put up a great regular season, but you go out up 3-1, and in my opinion, this might be one of the biggest playoff disasters of all time, just because it is on record the largest point disparity between first and eighth place. And
it's second most.
Is it second most?
I think it was second most. I don't know what the other one was, but it was the second most.
But either way, I mean, it was
ridiculous spread.
40-some points. I mean, it was just a huge spread, and it wasn't like a lot of people are going to point to that collapse by Tampa Bay against Columbus, but again, Boston had 3 chances to close it out.
It wasn't a shock. It was. That one was like, oh my gosh, Columbus is up 3-0. They're going to win the series. It was over. It was already over. Whereas this one was like, okay, you get to go into a game 7. You guys have been here before. Like, hey, the Leafs came back down 3-1 to the Bruins, and the Bruins won game 7. Like, they've been there before. And ironically, the Bruins have beaten the Leafs in 3 separate game 7s, but they are 0-5 against all the other game 7s that they've played. So they needed the Leafs real bad, and they didn't get it. The Panthers move on to the Leafs. We'll get to that series, but the Kraken and the Avalanche, I'm I'm as surprised as maybe more so. Like the Panthers to me were like, okay, this is a good team. They had a bad regular season, and they'll have a shot against the Bruins. The Kraken, however, it just didn't seem like they had the goaltending to be able to do this. And my goodness, all they got was goaltending from Philip Grubauer, who turned back the clock and summoned his Colorado Avalanche self and like was the star of the show for the most part in this series.
Yeah, and it makes me wonder too. I mean, that's the thing, right? There's some little bit of swag when you get to beat your former team, right? I mean, that's just, especially because they went on to win a Stanley Cup after they dumped you, off to Seattle and just said, you know what, you go ahead and sign him. We're not going to pay him that kind of money. So there's a little bit of, chip on your shoulder, a little bit of, twinkle in your eye when you get to go through that handshake line. But I mean, look, when you look at Colorado, their best players were good. They did not disappoint, right? I mean, McKinnon 7-7, right? But he still was all over the ice. He still was creating chances. I mean, he was better than I think his point total says on the score sheet. And Rantanen again 10 points in 7 games. So these guys.
Well, they were the only ones doing anything.
Right,
I think it was
the problem.
Samson between Rantanen, McKinnon, and Makar. I think they had points on every single goal. Like they helped on every goal. That's insane.
It wouldn't surprise me at all. And I mean, you look at so the big thing we talked about going into the series was, was that second line center spot going to hurt them, right? Because, Nazem Kadri came in last year when they won the Cup, and he was a big difference maker a lot of games. And they have JT Compher coming and playing 22 and a half minutes a night, which is a huge amount of time. But this guy only manages to put up 2 points in 7 games, and you wonder because he's heading into this offseason UFA. If Colorado's going to look at that and say, you know what, no, we're gonna move on, we're gonna go sign someone else, or if maybe he cost himself a couple $1 million too by kind of dropping the ball these playoffs.
Yeah, I don't know about millions, but definitely, yeah. I mean, maybe years. That
sure.
Could be. You're just not as willing to sign a guy to a long-term deal. Yeah, and then I mean, it's crazy that the Kraken, they go and game 1 against the Dallas Stars, and they put up a 5 spot on Jake Ottinger. And I should say, apparently the only one who can score on Grubauer is Joe Pavelski. He must have been looking at his playoff stats and going, man, I'm behind the 8 ball right now. So he goes and scores 4 freaking goals. 2 in the third period with just basically 10 minutes, 7 minutes left. And ties the game, but Seattle still wins it in OT. I mean, the Stars should be okay if anyone else but Pavelski can show up. It'd be good, but
yeah, the Seattle Kraken just can't seem to handle that net front presence right now.
Crazy.
That almost bit him in the ass last night, but
it didn't, because they get scoring from everywhere. Just crazy that. The Kraken are where they are, and they're doing it in a different way. It's kind of been probably the last, what would we say, like really the last 10 years or so, where it's like you can't win the Cup without having this like a high-end, very elite talent. Maybe the last team that you would compare this Kraken team to would be like, maybe like the Carolina Hurricanes of 2006 would be the closest comparison to a team that actually won the Cup. Do I think that Seattle will win the Cup? No, but if we were going to compare them to a team that has won the Cup, it really would be the Hurricanes of that year, who didn't really have that superstar player. They had really good players, just like the Kraken. I mean, the Kraken have players who've scored a lot of goals for them, like Jared McCann, because there's no one else to do it. But I don't think that Jared McCann would even be, on other teams. I don't know that he would find his way into the top line.
Yeah, it's funny. You think losing a 40-goal scorer, right? You think, okay, well, this series is over with. No thanks. Kraken make a series out of this one.
What if the Leafs had kept Jared McCann and let Alex Kerfoot go?
Oh boy!
I think about that every day. It haunts me. Well, what are you going to do? He probably wouldn't have gotten the same opportunities, and so it wouldn't have resulted in the same thing. But final series is the Devils and the Rangers. We both picked this series to go to 7 games. We were right on that account. But I picked the Devils to win. You had the Rangers. What happened to the Rangers here, Justin?
Boy, I just honestly think that...
Is it fair to just say Schmid?
I mean, he's one of the reasons, right? But I think a lot of it just had to do with the fact that New Jersey they looked much, much faster. Anytime the Rangers would grab the puck, right? I remember watching that Game 7, and anytime they get in the zone, they'd just chip and dump, try to get down there. They'd have the puck. Maybe they might, win the battle, right? Those 50-50 battles in the corner. They get the puck, they make one pass, and then, again, New Jersey just so fast. They're on top of the Ranger players just so quickly. And then, of course, now the puck's going the other way. And, New York couldn't sustain any kind of offensive pressure that whole entire game. And I think that was pretty much the most part for the last, 3 out of those last 4 games there. That's just the way it just seemed to go. And, when we talked about that whole speed, right? I mean, the only line that really looked like they had any offensive pressure at any time was the kid line because they were fast, right? Granted, it didn't turn into any points for guys like Lafreniere or, Kakko, but, again, I think just, a lot of older players up front, and they just looked a little slow. And you've talked about it multiple times, right? A guy like Chris Kreider, who makes his living net front on the power play. I mean, 5-on-5, he
had 6 goals.
Yeah, I mean, he looked just below average this whole series.
5-on-5, he's just not good.
Patrick Kane looked like he was, especially in Game 7, Patrick Kane looked like he did have some legs, like he had some juice going. But for whatever reason, man, I don't know why Gerard Gallant did not want to play him on that top line with Zibanejad, who is not a slow player by any means. But, you'd think, okay, let's put those two together. They've got some legs. Maybe they might generate something. But kept going back to Tarasenko, who's not a fast skater. I
thought that watching Patrick Kane, and he looks like his hips are taped together. I thought he looked... I mean, he carried the puck into the zone, and he just kind of gets it taken off of his stick, and it's going the other way multiple times. I did not think that he looked very good. I mean, I would say, if he's not going and getting some kind of, at least some extreme rehab on that hip, maybe some surgery, I'm not sure, but it didn't look, he didn't look right. And I think that's kind of what the Chicago Blackhawks have kind of been pointing at all year long, that he's definitely not 100%. I think it's fair to say he wasn't 100%. Maybe he's 90, but there's definitely something there where he's not himself. And it makes me wonder, what's the career of Patrick Kane looking like? Because if I'm the Rangers, I'm not signing him. They're not going to. No, they don't have the money to sign him for sure. But I mean, if he was, hey, I'll take a 1 year, $1 million, or if he was willing to go somewhere for cheap to try and win the cup, that would be fair. But I mean, that's going to be an interesting one because he's such a big name. But what does he actually bring to the table, especially over 82 games? How many of those games is he going to play in? You're going to be paying a guy for probably 60 games, which has to be factored in. And he just, I don't think I'd want to take the risk on a Patrick Kane because of, just the way he'd change your locker room, but also the potential for health issues. I don't know that he's somebody that I would target personally.
You know what? I probably would, just because, again, he brings experience. He has that cup pedigree. And I still think he can produce in a limited role, right? Maybe you give him 16, 17 minutes a night and make him a power play 1 specialist. I think he has the opportunity to still give a little bit. Of course, I'm not paying more than, $4.5 million for this guy, in all honesty. But I think really what a team that might need somebody like that would be maybe like a Buffalo Sabres team, right? A team that's got a lot of youngsters who have a lot of guys that can give you speed. And so maybe, a guy like Patrick Kane is somebody who can come in and elevate a lot of those young guys to the next level where they need to go to be able to say, hey, you know what, we're a playoff contender now. Because Buffalo's knocking on the door, and maybe they fix their goaltending a little bit and get another guy back on D. They might, Patty Kane added to that forward group might just be enough to propel them to the next level.
Seems like a Taylor Hall signing.
Well, as long as you're not paying that guy $100 million,
as long as you're not paying him a 1 year, $11 million deal, should be fine. All right. Well, since we're on the Devils, why don't we just skip ahead to that Devils Hurricane series, because that one is tonight at 7 o'clock. We're recording this on Wednesday, so it's on a Wednesday. Surprisingly, Eric Haula leading the way for the Devils with 6 points and 4 goals in the first series. No surprise here that Sebastian Aho leading the way for Carolina with 7 points and 4 goals in the first round. But now, the Devils and the Hurricanes face off against each other in what really may, the way that I kind of see it is the Devils are getting a team that plays similar to the Rangers, where they're like more willing to dump the puck in, but the Hurricanes have a much stricter system and they have more speed than the Rangers. So I think they match up a little bit better with the Devils, but the Devils have had a decent primer with playing the Rangers, who play, in that wheelhouse, at least, of the Hurricanes.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think they do a very good job of playing within their system, and I think they, again, what we saw with the Rangers, right, the way they like to play, chip and go get it. I think Carolina will have a little bit more success because they do have the wheels to do it. The one thing I am, concerned about for Carolina, again, I mentioned it in the first round where I thought they would probably fall to the Islanders because of this, is their lack of goal scoring, right? When you're missing a guy like Pacioretty and Svechnikov, is that going to come back to bite you? Now, I mean, obviously it didn't for Carolina because they just play such a good system where, again, you don't necessarily need to have those elite goal scorers, but, can you rely on Paul Stastny to chip in, 3 goals in 6 games in this series? I don't know if, he's going to be able to do it again, but we'll obviously see. I think for the difference for the Devils for me is I'm expecting some guys on the Devils to step up that maybe, they look like they were going to produce a little bit more than what they did. And 2 guys I'm talking about are Thomas Tatar and Timo Meier. Meier, no points in 7 games. Tatar, only 1 goal. And I think those guys look better than what their score sheets actually say. And, I think, again, those guys are going to give Devils a little bit of depth that, again, when it comes to the goal scoring aspect that Carolina necessarily doesn't have, and they've got the speed to do it.
Yeah, I mean, man, I look at this series and I see a long one, right? It's just, this just doesn't seem like a series that's going 5 games.
No, not at all.
I maybe the biggest question mark coming into this series is the goaltending, right? Like the Devils used 2 goaltenders in round 1. Obviously, they're going with Schmid now because of the way that he's played. But at the same time, do we not recognize that if Schmid struggles a couple games, that they could go back? That there's another goaltender there waiting. And then at the same time, same with the Carolina Hurricanes. Do they stick with Freddie Anderson, or are we going Antti-Ranta? Like, I know Frederik Andersen is going to start here today, but there's that question again. All year long, you went between 2 goalies. Is it really best to just lean on one guy all playoffs?
Yeah, I think for both of these teams, what we're probably going to see is when, as long as one guy's playing hot, that's who they're sticking with, right? But the minute they say Schmid lets in a 6 spot or a 5 spot one game, right, and gets burnt pretty bad, they're going to go back to Vanacek, I think, and just give him a shot, see what he could do. And I mean,
I know Vanacek obviously had 2 rough games in the first 2 games of the playoffs. I mean, led in 5 goals in both those games, games 1 and 2, and didn't get another shot. I don't know that. I watched some of those games. I watched all the goals. I don't think that I could put the onus on Vanacek for them losing those games. I mean, that was just either. The Rangers were just overpowering them, and the Devils, to a certain extent, you could see it. It was, hey, it's their first time back in the playoffs. A lot of these guys were playing their very first NHL playoff games. It's fair that it's going to take a second to kind of adjust to a new, just a different style of play, but also a different level of intensity. But the Devils caught on quick. And
they did.
Obviously, they go and they win 4 of 5 to close out the series. But it's I mean, Schmid looks like he's going to be the guy. But I guess the real question is, does Freddie Andersen stay healthy? Because that's the biggest question mark. And he hey, it was the first time he was healthy, and he missed. He played game 1, right? Ranta played game 1.
Yeah, Ranta played game 1.
Yeah. It's. I think that Frederik Andersen versus Schmid. I mean, it's kind of this. Anderson's almost like an old name at this point. Like, he's been around the league for a long time, but he hasn't really had a big impact on a playoff in a long time. And here he's got the opportunity to send his team to the conference finals if he can win this series. But this is really a series of two goalies that are could steal the show, but also could easily be forgotten in the mix of all this.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a short leash for both goaltenders, and it's just going to be who ride the hot hand. And it wouldn't shock me if both these teams make goaltending changes at any point. Not necessarily because the goalies are playing bad, but I think just because maybe they want to give their team a shot in the arm and say, you know what, we're going with a different guy today. We want to give our guys a little boost in the locker room.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Wake them up.
Look at the playoffs in general. You got the Devils with Schmid and Vitek Vanacek, the Hurricanes with their Ranta and Anderson. Oilers are playing Stuart Skinner, maybe Jack Campbell, and the Golden Knights are playing Laurent Brossoit. The Seattle Kraken with Philip Grubauer, like the Leafs Samsonov, and the Panthers just finally went back to Bobrovsky. It seems like there really isn't, other than Ottinger, you wouldn't look at any of these teams and say, oh, they have elite goaltending.
Right.
None of them.
Yeah, that is weird.
And Ottinger let in 5 goals in game 1. So.
Yeah, and I think that's why, again, when we've come to the trade deadline the last couple of years, why these goaltenders, these legit starters, have not gotten the first round picks, not gotten the big returns that I think a lot of teams have tried to get for number ones. Because again, I think a lot of teams know you don't need an elite goaltender now to. Again, depending on your team, right? The Rangers definitely needed Shesterkin to play elite to stay in that series, I think, towards the end. But nowadays, if you have a good system and a good group of guys in front, especially with goal scoring growing up, you don't necessarily need an elite guy. If you can have a decent 1A 1B combo, you can go pretty far in these playoffs.
Yeah, tell that to Vasilevsky. Yeah, Vasilevsky. I mean, I guess Darcy Kemper looked elite with the Avalanche. Well, he definitely looked elite. Like from a stats perspective, he was elite playing with the Avalanche. He was fine with the Capitals, but definitely didn't have the same level of play happening in front of him with the Capitals. But I don't know that you can win. It's very rare that you win with an Antti Niemi. Right, like you think about where Antti Niemi was when what was that, the 2010 Blackhawks when they won?
Yeah,
that like he was relatively unknown. It was kind of like who's this guy, and he rolled through. That's rare. It's rare to win with a goalie who just like really has no pedigree whatsoever. But it might happen again this year. It very well might happen this year. I mean, really, the Stars are the only team. I guess if the Panthers were to ride out Bobrovsky, you would say, I mean, he's won a Vezina trophy. I guess he'd be the only goalie left with a Vezina trophy.
Yeah, I mean, he's paid certainly like an elite goaltender. That's for sure.
Jonathan Quick never won a Vezina. He just has a constant.
Oh, he did.
He did win a Vezina?
He won a Vezina. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So then I guess there are technically 2 goalies left in the playoffs with Vezinas, but Jonathan Quick is not squeaking into the lineup anytime soon. So
no.
Ottinger may have one. Ottinger probably will have a Vezina before all is said and done. But I obviously.
Oh no, I am wrong. No. Quick has 2 Jennings, no Vezina.
Jennings. Yeah, that's what I thought. I didn't think he had a didn't think that he ever won a Vezina. He never really had, he never had a blow me out of the water regular season. He just had an unbelievable couple playoffs.
Well, he did get he finished second in 11-12 when he did win the Conn Smythe, and he actually finished 5th in Hart Trophy voting. So,
oh shoot, look at you,
which is wild. I want to see again who. So we had. Okay, Henrik Lundqvist finished 3rd in Hart Trophy voting, and that's obviously who won the Vezina that year. Yeah. A .930 save percentage to Jonathan Quick's .929 and a 1.97 to a 1.95 goals against.
Jeez.
I mean that's just
1.7. Yeah, that was back in the day when nobody could score. Now we've got goal scorer. Now the game has changed. I mean, it is pretty crazy how much the game has changed over the last 10 years. I think for the better. I'm so glad scoring's finally high. I mean, in the playoffs, it's still relatively low in comparison to the regular season, but still, I mean, game 1, 5-4, cracking the Stars with an elite goaltender on the Stars side, letting in 5 goals. It's just fun. Should we give predictions for that Devils Hurricanes?
Yeah, let's go. I think you and I already have them, so let's. You go first. Go right ahead.
Yeah, I picked the Hurricanes in 7 games. I think the Hurricanes are. They've been here before, and I think that is. I know that the Rangers went to the conference finals, all that. I just think that the Hurricanes are kind of set up to win this series, and I like them better than the Devils because of the system that they play, and I think that they have more speed than the Rangers, and I think that they can keep up with the Devils a little more.
Okay. Yeah. I went Devils in 7, so I think you and I both have this series going 7. But for me, I think the Devils are starting to find themselves, right? I mean, you mentioned that those first 2 games, they weren't ready for the playoff intensity, and really the Rangers knew what it took to go into the playoffs and what it was going to take to go to the next round. And Devils weren't ready, but they certainly found it pretty quick. And I think ultimately they have enough speed and talent. I think guys like I mentioned, Tatar and Timo Meier are going to find the score sheet a little bit more than they did in the first round and ultimately make a series out of this. Although I do think it is not going to be solely because of goaltending that the Devils get past Carolina. I think this one's going to be a little bit more high scoring than most people think.
Okay. Oilers and Golden Knights, the late night game. Probably, I think, will this be I guess it's nice when you have 2 actual late night games. When you get those like Chicago Nashville series where you're like, oh, that game's going to start at 8. I just like that game that comes on much later than the other ones. Oilers, Golden Knights, both teams squeaked by. Golden Knights in 5, Oilers in 6. So both teams pretty rested coming in here. I think they've both had at least 4 or 5 days of rest. So that won't be any excuse. And here we go. McDavid versus the Golden Knights, I think, is what we thought maybe this could be a first round matchup. It's a second round matchup, and we get the battle of 2 shitty goaltenders and some really good offensive talent.
Yeah, we got the number 1 pick versus the number 2 pick, right? The year McDavid Eichel went 1-2.
Yes.
And part of me, actually, it was funny when people were, going into that draft. I remember looking at some people and I was just like, you know what? I know all the hype around McDavid, but for some reason in my mind at the time, I was like, you know what? I think Eichel's going to have a better career long term. And it seemed like it those first couple of years because McDavid kept getting hurt all the time. But then, oh man, was I ever wrong about that one?
Just a little bit.
I've since come around my ways.
Okay. I've since admitted my wrongdoings. Yes, you'll be forgiven. I mean, it's just a few years of what? Oh my gosh, what's it called?
Shame.
No, what's the purgatory?
Yes. Okay.
All right, I'm not Catholic, so it's not there. It's not readily on my mind. Yeah, you just a few years of purgatory, but probably the more Hail Marys you say, the better it'll be for you.
There we go.
Okay. The obvious is obviously Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl. They're going to perform. I'd say Draisaitl definitely had the better first round. I mean, 7 goals, an unbelievable first round in 6 games for Leon Draisaitl. But you've got to think, in order to win this series, the Oilers are going to have to get some production from their bottom 6. That's going to have to be a big change because the Golden Knights are, they've got depth that maybe the Oilers don't have. But
I agree.
But I think the goaltending slightly favors the Oilers. Laurent Brossoit, how long can he keep this up? There's a reason why Laurent Brossoit was so far down their depth chart. He's not that good. He's fine. He's a fine goalie. He can back up. But he's not a starting goaltender in the NHL. He has never been a starting goaltender in the NHL.
What I wonder for him is necessarily, again, that first round he got to play the Jets, his former team, right? So similar to Group Power, there's some swag that comes with that, right? Where you get that pure joy of just rubbing it in the former
and maybe
team,
you know the players a little better. You know
exactly.
their tendencies.
So now you're coming up. I mean, and again, no offense to the Jets, but they don't have elite talent like McDavid and
the Jets played absolute garbage.
They did for the most part of that series, and there's a reason their head coach ripped into them at the end of that series. I mean,
did you see the email that the Jets sent out?
No, I did not.
Yeah, the Jets sent out an email and to fans. I don't know if it was season ticket holders or just like people on their mailing list, and it specifically said, "We're so proud of our Jets for giving their a great effort," or something like that. Like something that directly contradicted what Rick Bowness said, like that they played like crap and they didn't have any, like we didn't have the effort. And in the email it said, "We're so proud of the effort that they gave," or something. And so people are putting them side by side and going, this literally got sent out the day after he said what he said, and it directly contradicted it. So, of course, now there's the is Bonus going to even come back? But that's another story for another day.
Yeah, that'll be a nice off-season topic. But okay, that's interesting. I did not read that, so Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome. So, in terms of defense in this series, I think Matthias Ekholm has changed the Edmonton Oilers' back end. He's made it a legitimate, Stanley Cup contending back end. And the Vegas Golden Knights, I'd say the one shaky part of that series against the Jets, they were saved because they put up so much offensive numbers, but their back end did not look good against the Jets. They were making mistakes. They were getting rushed by the Jets, and I think that's what would worry me the most for the Golden Knights in this series is, can the Oilers just completely expose what they have back there? Not that Shea Theodore is a bad defense. He's a great defenseman, as is Pietrangelo. I don't think either guy played to their potential in that first round. What do we get from them here in round 2 against the Oilers?
Yeah, I do think you're going to see maybe Theodore and Pietrangelo maybe take a step back, right? Not necessarily rush in as much as they typically do, because again, when you go up against McDavid and Draisaitl, one of these two guys are going to be on the ice when they are. So, I don't think you're going to see them rushing the play as much, because if they make a mistake, right? If they get caught flat-footed, Draisaitl and McDavid are going back the other way and probably scoring. So you got to play a little bit more cautious if I'm the Vegas Golden Knight defense. And that's totally fine, right? Because I think, when you do, if you're playing cautious and you have those opportunities to take the puck back the other way and try to capitalize on turnovers, right? The one great thing I will say is Vegas does have a lot of good forwards that play good structural defense, right? Not necessarily like Carolina where they do it such as a team effort, but they've got individuals like Mark Stone, Stevenson, and William Karlsson that I think do a very good job of playing a two-way game. And we know how good Mark Stone is, and I think he's going to be out there every moment that Connor McDavid is, if the coaches have their way, or not necessarily the coaches, but if Vegas's coaches have their way, they're going to get Stone out there anytime that McDavid is on the ice. And hopefully, like I said, Karlsson and the rest of the company can keep Draisaitl at bay if they have those two guys split up. But for me, if I'm the Vegas defense, though, it's just play it safe, right? Don't try to overthink it. Don't try to overdo it. Just play it safe. You've got quality guys back there on the the back end, but for some of those other guys, maybe necessarily like Martinez, who in my opinion has kind of slowed down a little bit. Don't try to overthink it or overdo it.
I think that this is a huge franchise-changing series right here. I think it's not out of the realm of possibility that these two teams see each other again next year in the second round, or in the first round. These two teams are going to be here together. I look at the Golden Knights and I look at their construction, and I see a team that needs to win now. Like the Oilers, obviously they want to win, and I think the league desperately wants to have Connor McDavid go as far as they can. But also, at the same time, they would love to have the Golden Knights go far because they are just a spectacle. But when you you consider the Golden Knights like a lot of their core. Petrangelo's 33, Martinez is 35. Even Mark Stone, the way that he plays, he's 30, and he's not necessarily going to get healthier. Like, he just always seems to have some kind of nagging injury. And the way that I look at this team, I just kind of go, well, you guys probably need to win or go really deep with this core, because it really, it's been a while since they were in the Stanley Cup Finals in 2017? Is that 2017 or was that 2018? Right,
2018. Yep.
It's been a minute now. You've got a team. You're spending. You're making huge trades. It's time now for this team to kind of take that next step. I think at this point we can now write that first year off as like that was a completely different team. You had 3 guys on this team that were there, maybe 4. You had the Carlson, Marchessault, Riley Smith, and not much else from that team was here. Was Shea Theodore on that team?
Yeah, he was.
He was, yeah. So, but you look at the core now. The core is Mark Stone, Jack Eichel, even Chandler Stevenson to a certain extent, Alex Pietrangelo, and that team was not here at all when they went to the finals. So this is a very different team, and I think it's really time for them to take that next step. Like, this is a very important series for this franchise. They can't go out in 5 or 6 games. I think if it goes to a 7th game and you lose to the Edmonton Oilers, it is what it is. But I think this is a very important series for the Golden Knights because they need to make progress. And it seems like there has not been much progress over the last 5 years since they went to the finals.
No, I think that's a good point. I think the one thing when you look at this team, right, is they've always been known over the last few years, especially since going to the finals, they've been going after the big fishes, right? They wanted to bring the big names in, but this free agency, there's not going to be any big names. There's not going to be a lot of money for them to spend. And I think really if you want to attract maybe some depth pieces, guys that can contribute and maybe get them in on a cheaper deal, you have to say, you know what, we're still a contender, right? We're just, our window's still open. And so, again, losing to McDavid, losing to Draisaitl, there's no shame in that. But you don't want to go out in 4 or 5 games, like you mentioned, right? Because then that proves that they were just that much better than you. But if you go out in 7 games, if you make a series out of it, then you can easily say, okay, cool, this Vegas Golden Knights team is for real. They can compete against McDavid, the team that is, from the start has been picked by everybody to be the Stanley Cup champs. And so I think if you can make a series out of it at least, or even better yet, just win the series, again, you're going to keep your window open and you're going to keep those free agents coming in this offseason if you don't somehow happen to make it, to the Stanley Cup finals or, say you lose in the Cup final.
Yeah. All right. Who do you have in this series?
Yeah, so for me, I'm taking Vegas in 7 games. I know it's hard to pick against Connor McDavid, but ultimately, I do think you mentioned it briefly. It is, for me, the concern is the depth for the forward group for the Edmonton Oilers, right? I think guys like Yamamoto, maybe even to some extent, you could look at a guy like, Warren Foegele, Matthias Janmark. These guys, I just don't think have enough in the tank to compete against the depth of the Vegas Golden Knights forward group. Now, again, that doesn't mean that guys like Nugent Hopkins, Evander Kane,
that guy who had 100 points in the regular season, who's just playing on the second line, yeah, exactly.
Again, they're going to try to pick up the slack a little bit more, but ultimately, I think guys like Mark Stone are going to play a much more significant role when it comes to shutting down McDavid and Draisaitl, and I think Jack Eichel too. Again, we haven't talked about him yet, but I think he's going to find another level in this game because, again, when you look at that number 1 to number 2 draft pick comparison, that's going to hang over his shoulders for a long time until he essentially beats McDavid to the cup, right? It's going to be saying, well, you're never good enough. And I don't think anybody's ever going to say that Eichel's ever as good as McDavid, but, again, I think there's going to be
maybe in terms of impact on his team. On his team's success, you could definitely compare those two. That's about the only comparison. It's not even fair. Like it's not fair. Right. I don't think anybody's going, boy, Jack Eichel should have been better than Connor McDavid. No, I don't think so.
and he won't. And when you look at his career, when it's all said and done, right, you're never going to look at that. But I think for Eichel, if he gets the opportunity, right, similar to a guy like Jonathan Toews, in my opinion, right, he's never going to be as good as maybe some of those other guys around his era, but he was still one of the best, right? And so that's what you want to be remembered as.
He was
Eichel,
a champ.
One of the best.
He was a champ.
Right? Yeah, you were a champ. You want to be one of the best, and you want to be a winner. So for Eichel, right, this is an opportunity to prove you're one of the best and a winner.
Yeah, I think Mark Stone. Well, he's a very good player. I think he gets a lot more love than he should from this.
Ooh. He gets a lot of love from me. So
he gets a lot of love from you, but I think he's a little overrated. I think on the defensive side, he's very good, but I don't think that he's honestly. Between Mark Stone and Anthony Cirelli, I think I'm taking Anthony Cirelli between the two guys.
Oh, okay.
I think that Mark Stone's very overrated. I think Jack Eichel is a really nice player, but I think that he's probably leans more towards the low end of the top end centers. And I think that the Oilers are going to... I think that the Vegas Golden Knights have the depth to hang with the Oilers. And I think that these guys can maybe shut down Draisaitl a little bit, slow him down a little bit, and you've got yourself a series. I picked the Oilers in 7. I was tempted to say 6, but I'm just going to say 7 because it's more fun that way. But I've got the Oilers, and I think that you'll watch this series and go, "Wow, the Oilers are the better team." But maybe because of the goaltending and a couple bounces for the Golden Knights, they find themselves winning an extra game or so and pushing this one to the limit. But the Oilers, in my mind, are the better team. Okay.
We shall see.
Watch Mark Stone have 10 points in this series.
I sure hope so.
Me too. Okay. Well, let's go to Kraken Stars, who've already played one game last night. 5-4 win for the Kraken in overtime. Yanni Gourde scores in the first overtime period. Philip Grubauer gets the win. Joe Pavelski scores 1 million goals. 4 goals in... He now has 4 playoff goals. So he, like I said earlier, he made up for not playing really almost the entire first round, getting hurt in game 1. And the Kraken are up 1-0 in the series. Where do you see the rest of this series going?
Boy, I think, again, when you look at coaching, right, I'm going to take Dallas over, Seattle any day. And I think that's ultimately what it's going to go down to, right? We saw... that Seattle team just kind of come in waves, right? I think they do a really good job of having a balanced attack, right? I mean, obviously, for me, the best line last night was the Yanni Gourde line. They looked almost, I don't want to say, they looked like they were a number one legit line last night when they were on the ice. So they were playing very well, but I think ultimately they're just going to, Dallas is going to find a way to get a balanced attack and really just kind of swarm Seattle. And what I really like about Seattle and the reason they were able to get past Colorado in that first round is, again, that balanced attack, but all the guys were skating hard all the time, right? I mean, your third line just went as hard as your first line. So they got guys that can chip in at all depths of the forward group. And so for me, though, I think Dallas, obviously, I think you're going to see Rupe Hintz, Robertson turn it on at some point and not have to rely on Joe Pa as much. And hopefully they can get a little bit more contribution from guys like, Jamie Bennigan, who I thought didn't look necessarily bad last night, but, I think he can still find another level to his game against the Seattle team. And I'm hoping that guys like Wyatt Johnson show up as well, too. And ultimately, I think they will. Dallas, can play dirty. And then, of course, the one difference maker for me in this series is going to be, Ottinger. I thought after that 4 spot in the first period, they probably should have pulled him. Give him a little bit of rest. I know they, again, they had to go 6 games their first round. Again, he's the guy. There's no 1B, number 2 goaltender. They're going to rotate with him. He's pretty much the only goaltender left, maybe outside of Bobrovsky. Yeah,
they obviously felt though after that first period that it was 4-2. They still had a chance to come back, and I mean, obviously they did. They came back. I think they made the right call. He shut them out in the second and the third period. He was good the rest of the way. And every goalie's going to have a bad period here and there. It's just going to happen. And I mean, really, if you think about it, he had a bad 4 minutes. mean, they scored 4 goals in 3 minutes and 55 seconds.
Yeah, and I'm not necessarily blaming him for all those goals either. I don't think a lot of those were his fault. However, I do think, again, watching that second period, I initially thought them, Dallas coming out, they didn't really look like there was much that changed in the locker room, right? And I think sometimes just getting a fresh goaltender in there is enough to kind of spark things. And again, I was a little worried, that Seattle was going to overwhelm them a little bit. Because for me, a goaltending change, not necessarily because I don't necessarily worry about Scott Wedgwood coming in there and not being able to shut down Seattle. I think he would have given them some quality goaltending. Now, again, hindsight, right? It's easy to say, okay, cool. Ottinger was the right call. He came in, but for me, I would have liked to have seen a shot in the arm to that Dallas team and see how they responded to that. Because to me, that second period would have been much more entertaining. The rest of the game, the rest of the way, had the rest of his team responded the way they did ultimately in the third period.
I think that the Dallas Stars had a really hard time adjusting from playing the Minnesota Wild to the Kraken. The Wild definitely do not come at you in waves. They come at you in gunshots. Like,
right.
You get blown up by a couple lines, and then you've got this one line who can score. And that is not how Seattle comes at you at all. Seattle, they've got threats everywhere, and they roll 4 lines. And I think that it just took the Stars a minute to adjust. And I think you'll see a different game 2. Does it make any difference that Jared McCann should be back in game 3 for the Kraken and find his way onto home ice there in Seattle?
Yeah, I think that'll definitely make a difference. I mean, when you always get a 40 goal scorer back, right? I mean, that's always a huge boost.
It extends. I think to me, we're not talking predictions yet, but I guess we will. It's what extends this series to a potential 6 or 7 game series because they can score goals. Obviously, they've won game 1. I have the Stars winning this in 6. Which I'm standing by that. That's fine. Seattle can have that first game. Not really worried about the Stars. They've just played so well, and they play so good after a loss. In that series to Minnesota, every time they dropped a game, you could just feel how the following game they were different. They know how to come back, and they've been here before. They lost that game 5-1. They lost that 3-2. Game 3 to the Wild. They lose 5-1 and they come back. They win a tight 3-2 game, and in game 4 and then game 5 they just go shut them out. This is a team that bounces back from a loss.
Yeah, is it fair to say they're the Western Conference equivalent of Tampa Bay when it comes to not losing 2 in a row, right? I mean, we saw that with Tampa Bay until last year, right? They just basically were never losing 2 games in a row, and I think Dallas is kind of similar in that aspect that they know how to take it to a whole nother level after a loss, right? I think, they seemed like that a little bit last year. Ultimately, they just fell short. But for me, I agree with you. I think they're going to find another level for this game, too. And I think, again, having a guy like Joe Pavelski back, he only played about 14 minutes last night. And I think you're going to see him play a few more minutes.
Yeah, elevate those. Yeah. They'll creep them up slowly. And I expect the Dallas offense will awake, outside of Pavelski.
Yes, absolutely. And that's why I picked them in 6 games as well. And then ultimately the X factor for me is going to be, Ottinger. I think, Jakey there is going to come back from this first game, where he, maybe would have liked to have got 1 or 2 of those goals back and maybe didn't look his best, like you said, in that 4-minute stretch. And I think he's going to find another level to his game that maybe we didn't see in game 1. Ultimately I think Grubauer, yes, he played great in round 1, but I don't think he's going to sustain that kind of save percentage throughout this series. So, Dallas is going to find a way to light him up a few games here. And I think it's, again, Seattle's going to make it entertaining. McCann coming back is going to help a little bit, but ultimately I think they just fall a little short.
Okay, Leafs-Panthers. Panthers take game 1, 4-2 last night. I watched the whole game, and watching it, you go, the Leafs played good enough to win in a regular season game. The Panthers just were on a different level, and I think that actually was just from they didn't even go home after winning game 7. I think they're flying high after winning that game, and they were playing a very intense brand of hockey that maybe the Leafs just weren't quite ready for And the Panthers' speed was much different than the Tampa Bay Lightning, and I think that it took them a minute to adjust to that. You saw the first two goals. They're up 2-0. The Leafs come back, tie it at 2. The Verhaeghe goal killed me. They didn't talk about it on the broadcast. They didn't talk about it, but if you watch TJ Brody, the puck's right at the blue line, and TJ Brody does this, like, you can see it. Do I go for that puck? I'll go for that puck. Maybe I shouldn't go for that puck. And by that point, Verhaeghe's behind him. And
I don't think he saw Verhaeghe out of his.
No, I don't think he saw Verhaeghe. But I think that he either needed to make a play on the puck hard, or he needed to completely back off. And had he done one of those two things, he probably would have disrupted the play enough to where the puck doesn't get clean to Verhaeghe, or he just wins the puck battle and keeps the puck in. He made a halfway decision, and it ended up nothing good happened from it. And that ultimately is obviously what seals it. The Montour goal was what sealed it, but I think after that, the Panthers carried the bulk of the play there. But the Leafs, they had lots of opportunities to score. Bobrovsky was really good, and you just got to kind of tip your hat. Bobrovsky played better than Samsonov on this night, and the Panthers got some of the breaks. They got some of the bounces, and it was a 4-2 win. I didn't get to the end of that game and go, wow, the Leafs played like garbage, or like, wow, the Panthers played so well. It was a pretty evenly played games, lots of chances for both teams. The Panthers capitalized on theirs, and the Leafs couldn't score because Bobrovsky was good.
Yeah, Bobrovsky definitely. I mean, he came up with a few timely saves, and the one guy for me, right, who I think is going to be the biggest reason why if the Panthers are able to come away from this series and shut down the Leafs, I think is going to be Matthew Tkachuk, right? He's the X factor, and I watched him in Game 1. He was everywhere. He was all over the puck anytime. I think any Leafs player, if he was on the ice, I think he hit a post too. Yeah, and I mean, you saw it right on that last goal. He was able to basically create that damage that basically got the puck free and back out to a guy like Montour, who was able to snipe it home. And just you watched him. I mean, he was the reason, in my opinion, too. I think that again, Florida was able to get past Boston those last few games. He was so gruesome on everybody, and he created so many chances by being sandpaper, right? The reason they brought him in was for that, right? And it paid off in spades in round 1, and hopefully they're hoping that it pays off again in round 2 here against the Leafs. But for me, just looking at this Leafs forward group, right? I mean, they exchanged chances all night. It was a very entertaining game for me. It's what I was hoping for.
Yeah, it was a good game. It was just a good game. Not like, can't be mad about it.
Right, absolutely. And I mean, ultimately, I do think, when you look at this Leafs forward group, I think you're going to see a guy like, again, we didn't see him hit the score sheet other than just one lonely assist on that first Nyes goal. But I think Austin Matthews is going to be more of a difference maker.
Same with Marner.
Yeah, exactly. These guys Tavares, these guys just weren't on the score sheet, in this game much. And so I think you'll see them, produce a little bit more here going forward, which ultimately, in my opinion, is going to give the Leafs the edge here. Again, goaltending wise, I think right now, we're probably going to get just fair play out of both of these guys. I think they're just going to go, tit for tat. It's, I don't think one goaltender, when the series is all said and done, you're going to look at one guy and be like, okay, yeah, he definitely was that much better, elevated this team to win because of this guy. I think they're just going to, they're
both average goalies at this point.
Yeah.
I have the Leafs in 6. I'm sticking with Leafs in 6. But yeah, it'll be an entertaining series and a good one. Like, I mean, no doubt Florida could stretch this. Florida could win this series, and they showed it last night. I think the Leafs have more depth, but I especially like, you look at the two guys that scored for them, Nyes and Bunting. Matthew Nyes has been such a great pickup there late in the season, a good signing, and like coming in. Something I didn't think about with Matthew Nyes. I mean, he lost the NCAA championship at Amalie Arena in overtime. Then he went and played 3 overtime games at Amalie Arena with the Leafs, was on the ice for all 3 Leafs goals in Amalie Arena in overtime.
That's a little poetic.
So, yeah. He obviously was like, I'm never losing a game here ever again, which he hasn't. Right. He has not. I think, yes, Matthew Tkachuk is a dangerous player. I think really this is your first time kind of seeing a player like that. Like, there's no other player like him in the league, at least in the playoffs, or that the Leafs saw. Tampa Bay doesn't have a player like Matthew Tkachuk. So I think you're going to get a lot of film. You're going to get a lot of coaching and figuring out how to shut him down. So this is really, to me, a lot of the series is going to be about, how can Sheldon Keefe take this, and how can he help to shut down some of these players? Like, what can he do strategically, line matching, all that, and not being afraid to keep his big boys away from someone like him. And I think that the matchup would be like, well, get Marner, the defensive magic man, who's up for the Selke, by the way, to go in and play up against Matthew Tkachuk. But I don't know if that's the best matchup for Marner, because he's just so freaking huge. And you don't want him to. You also don't want him to get hurt. So he's very hard. It's hard because there's really not anyone that can match up with him in that sense. So it's going to have to come from a team matchup perspective. I'd say maybe like you can, you're going to put a guy like Jake McCabe on him. You're going to put a guy like Luke Shen on him who can physically stand toe to toe with him. But that's, obviously from the defensive standpoint, not the forwards.
Yeah, I personally, if it was me, I would love to see Ryan O'Reilly and Marner team up on the line and go toe to toe with the Tkachuk line, because I think Riley can play that defensive game very well. He's not as fast, where I think his speed is going to come in handy, but that physicality, I think Ryan O'Reilly's just going to give it to a guy like Tkachuk any chance he gets. And I think finding ways to disrupt Tkachuk, and his flow, right, his game is going to be key for this Tampa Bay team, the Toronto team. And then the other part about, this series too, for me, I took Toronto in 5. It's still possible, but I'm a little bit more doubtful after watching game 1 that it's going to happen that way. But look, the Maple Leafs went 0-for-4 on the power play. That's going to change. That won't sustain. And the Panthers 0-for-1, right? You saw Tkachuk and Barkov and Sam Bennett out there for a full 2 minutes of this power play. So again, you got to find ways to disrupt these guys and get them off the ice. Especially on special teams, because again, they didn't score, but I think they'll find a way to capitalize. So you gotta get them off their game a little bit. And for me, a guy like Ryan O'Reilly is going to be very key, I think, for that, playing against Barkov and Tkachuk.
Yep, I agree. By the way, the Panthers had lost 8 straight game 1s going into that game, so they finally get a game 1. That's a lot of game 1s to lose in a row. It is. That's got to date back to like the 90s.
Yeah, I think they said on the broadcast last night it was the first time since that Van Breesbroek, Stanley Cup run.
Oh, 94.
In the 90s.
Holy jumping.
96.
Or 96, yeah, sorry, yeah. 96. Yeah, wow. Well, it was bound to happen eventually. All right, well, so you've got the Leafs in 5. I have them in 6. You picked the Leafs in 5 over Tampa too, and it happened in 6. So hopefully that that just stands true. Well, I think that's it for our show. Any final thoughts as we go into round 2?
Yeah, I guess I would love to. Again, we talked about the Panthers, Leafs, and we know you're a Leafs fan. I guess who's going to be the guy for you that's going to propel the Leafs to win it in 6? If you had to pick one guy, who's going to be the MVP of this series for you?
Well, Morgan Riley was phenomenal in that series against Tampa Bay, and I think that he needs to keep being. I would say he was the Leafs' best player, and I think that he needs to continue being an absolute force from the back end and producing offensively, doing what he does best. And I think he's skating better than I've ever seen him. So I think he needs to. He looked fine last night, but I think that he can be better. And I think that he is probably the key to unlocking everything else that happens around the Leafs offense when he's out there.
I love it.
All right, well, that's our show. You can find us on Twitter at OT Hockey Talk. Let us know your picks for the first round. And until the next time, we will talk to you later. Enjoy round 2.